Thomas Bonner had always believed that success required sacrifice. At 42, he'd built a software consulting firm from nothing, traveling 3 weeks out of every month to keep clients satisfied across 3 continents. His daughter Emma, 8 years old with her mother's dark eyes and his own stubborn chin, had learned to mark his departures and returns on a calendar with different colored stars. Gold for departures, silver for returns. The refrigerator was a galaxy of her counting. He remembered their last breakfast together before the Tokyo trip. Emma had pushed her scrambled eggs around her plate, building small yellow mountains. 15 days this time, Ladybug, he'd said, using the nickname that made her smile. That's almost 3 weeks, Daddy. She hadn't looked up from her architectural eggs. I know, but when I get back, we'll go to that aquarium you wanted. The one with the shark tunnel. Promise? Promise. His wife Alberta had been leaning against the kitchen counter, coffee mug held in both hands like she was trying to warm herself against some internal cold. She'd been distant for months, since January, if he was honest. They'd met 12 years ago at a fundraiser where she'd been volunteering, all bright smiles and easy conversation. She'd worked in pharmaceutical sales then, before Emma was born, before she decided to be a stay-at-home mother. Her mother Eileen had moved in with them 2 years ago after her husband died, ostensibly to help with Emma while Thomas traveled. It had seemed like a good arrangement. You should say goodbye to Grandma, too, Alberta had said, her voice flat. Emma had slid from her chair and disappeared down the hallway. Thomas heard the low murmur of voices from the guest room where Eileen stayed. When Emma returned, something in her expression had changed, a tightness around her eyes that he'd noticed more frequently lately. What did Grandma say? Thomas had asked. Just goodbye. He'd kissed Emma's forehead, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Behave for Mom. I'll call every night. That had been 16 days ago. Tokyo had been a disaster of back-to-back meetings with Nakamura Industries, a client threatening to move to a competitor unless Thomas personally oversaw their system integration. 18-hour days. Hotel room at midnight. Wake at 5. His phone calls home went to voicemail more often than not. Emma's voice. It's okay, Daddy. Mom says you're busy saving the world. Alberta never came to the phone. The voicemail arrived at 3:17 a.m. Tokyo time. Thomas had been asleep for maybe 2 hours, dreaming about nothing he could remember. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He'd almost ignored it. Alberta sent drunk texts sometimes, rambling messages he'd learned to handle in the morning light. But something made him look. One voicemail. From Emma's iPad, the one she used for games and school assignments. He pressed play. Static first. Then breathing, small, rapid, the sound of panic trying to stay quiet. Daddy. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse and cracking. Daddy, it's so dark. I can't feel my legs anymore. It's really cold and I can't. A wet cough. Grandma said you're not coming back. She said you left us. But you promised. You promised the aquarium. Another cough. Deeper. Daddy, I'm scared. I'm really scared. Please come get me. Please. I try to be good. I tried really hard to be. The message cut off. Thomas sat up so fast the room spun. He called Emma's iPad. Straight to voicemail. He called the house line. It rang 15 times before going to the machine. He called Alberta's cell. Nothing. He called Eileen's cell, a number he'd programmed months ago for emergencies. It rang twice and someone hung up. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely dial 911. This is an emergency. My daughter. She left a message. She's hurt. I'm in Tokyo, but... Sir, slow down. What's your location? I'm in Tokyo, Japan. But my daughter is in Seattle. 4427 Riverside Drive. Her name is Emma Bonner. She's 8. She left me a voicemail saying she can't feel her legs, and it's dark, and please, you have to send someone now. The operator's voice shifted from routine to alert. Sir, stay on the line. I'm dispatching officers to that address immediately. Thomas pulled up flights on his laptop with one hand while gripping the phone with the other. The next direct flight wasn't for 6 hours. He booked it anyway, then found an earlier flight with 2 connections that would still take 14 hours total. He booked that too. He threw everything into his suitcase without folding, without organizing, just grabbing and shoving. Sir, officers are at the residence now. What do they find? I don't have that information yet. They're checking the premises. The basement. We have a basement. It's unfinished. We were going to check the basement. Please. A long pause. Keyboard clicks. Sir, they're checking now. Thomas zipped his suitcase. His vision had gone sharp and narrow. Everything outside a tight tunnel, seeming distant and unreal. He could hear his pulse in his ears. Sir, they found her. The relief lasted half a second. She's alive, but unresponsive. Paramedics are on scene. Sir, I need to ask, who else should be in the home? My wife, Alberta Bonner, and her mother, Eileen Stevenson. More keyboard sounds. Voices in the background on the operator's end, urgent and overlapping. Sir, your wife and her mother are also on scene. They're being detained for questioning. You should know, the officers found your daughter chained to a pipe in the basement. She appears to have been there for some time. Thomas didn't remember hanging up. Didn't remember the taxi to the airport or the first flight to San Francisco. He remembered turbulence over the Pacific and wanting to scream at the plane to go faster. He remembered a layover in a fluorescent terminal where he bought coffee he couldn't drink and stood at the window watching planes take off, over and over, each one not his. Dan McCarthy met him at SeaTac Airport, a homicide detective in his 50s with tired eyes and a weathered face that suggested he'd seen too many versions of human cruelty. He was holding a sign with Thomas's name on it, standing apart from the crowd of cheerful reunion seekers. Mr. Bonner? Detective McCarthy, Seattle PD. I'll take you to the hospital. How is she? McCarthy started walking, forcing Thomas to follow. Critical but stable. She's sedated right now. I need to prepare you for what you're going to see. They walked through the terminal in silence until they reached the parking garage. McCarthy's unmarked sedan smelled like coffee and old fast food. He pulled out of the garage before speaking again. Your daughter was restrained with a padlock chain around her ankle, attached to a drainage pipe in your basement. Based on her condition and the evidence we collected, she'd been there approximately 16 days. The number landed like a physical blow. 16 days. The entire length of his trip. The basement had been prepared in advance. A bucket for waste. No food that we could find. One empty water bottle. The chain was long enough for her to reach the bucket, but not the stairs. Someone had removed the light bulbs. Thomas stared out the window at the gray Seattle morning. You said they detained my wife. Your wife and her mother are currently in custody. Neither has said much, but what they have said, McCarthy merged onto I-5. Your wife claims your daughter was being punished for misbehavior. Her mother corroborates that story. They maintain they were checking on her regularly, bringing food and water. That's bullshit. The physical evidence contradicts their statement. Your daughter is severely dehydrated and malnourished. She has pressure sores consistent with limited movement. The medical examiner estimates she had water maybe twice during the entire period, possibly less. Thomas closed his eyes, saw Emma pushing eggs around her plate, heard her voice. That's almost 3 weeks, Daddy. Had she known? Had Alberta told her what was going to happen? There's more, McCarthy said. We found a life insurance policy in your wife's bedroom. $5 million on you, taken out 8 months ago. Your signature on the documents. I never signed any, Thomas stopped. 8 months ago, Alberta had brought in papers to sign for Emma's school, something about a field trip permission and health forms. He'd signed without reading closely, rushing to pack for a trip to Frankfurt. I thought they were school forms. We figured. Your wife also has a boyfriend. Roger West, 36, works at the same gym she goes to. Personal trainer. We brought him in for questioning this morning. He's claiming he didn't know anything about Emma. You believe him? McCarthy's jaw tightened. I don't believe anyone yet. But his phone records show he was in contact with your wife multiple times a day for the past 4 months, including the day you left for Tokyo and every day after until we showed up at his apartment. They pulled into Harborview Medical Center. McCarthy parked in a spot marked for police vehicles. Mr. Bonner, I need to be straight with you. This case is complicated. Your wife will claim she was disciplining Emma. That went too far, but wasn't intended to cause serious harm. Her lawyer, and she's already got one, Lewis Mills, good attorney, is going to paint this as a mental health crisis, postpartum depression that went untreated, isolation for being alone while you traveled. They'll say she snapped. She chained my daughter in a basement for 16 days. I know, and we're going to make sure she faces consequences. But I need you to understand how these cases work. We've got attempted murder charges filed, along with child abuse and endangerment. But if her lawyer can convince a jury this was a mental breakdown rather than premeditated, she could get a reduced sentence. Mental facility instead of prison. Out in a few years with good behavior. Thomas turned to look at the detective. And the grandmother? Eileen Stevenson. She's claiming she didn't know the full extent of what was happening. Says she thought Emma was just in her room, that Alberta told her Emma was being homeschooled temporarily and shouldn't be disturbed. We don't buy it, but proving she was complicit is harder than proving your wife's guilt. The voicemail. Emma said her grandmother told her I wasn't coming back. McCarthy nodded. We have the voicemail. It's evidence. But a defense attorney could argue Emma misunderstood, or that Eileen was just trying to comfort her by saying you'd take time to get back from Japan. It's not a confession. They walked through the hospital entrance, past a waiting room where a television played morning news on mute. McCarthy led him to an elevator, pressed the button for the 4th floor. Your daughter's in the ICU. The doctors can explain her condition better than I can, but, Mr. Bonner, she's going to need a lot of support. Physically and psychologically. What happened to her, being trapped in darkness, told her father abandoned her, left alone for that long at her age. That's going to leave marks that don't show up on x-rays. The elevator opened. A nurse at the ICU desk looked up as they approached, and her expression shifted when McCarthy showed his badge. She led them down a hallway where machines beeped and hummed, where other families kept vigil through glass walls. Emma's room was at the end. Through the window, Thomas could see his daughter in a hospital bed that seemed enormous around her small frame. For lines ran into her arm. A ventilator mask covered half her face. Her skin was so pale it looked translucent under the fluorescent lights. Jesus Christ, Thomas whispered. A doctor emerged from the room, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. Mr. Bonner? I'm Dr. Jasmine Franklin. I've been overseeing Emma's care. Is she going to be okay? Let's talk in the consultation room. They sat in a small room with uncomfortable chairs and a box of tissues on the table. Dr. Franklin pulled up Emma's chart on a tablet. Emma is stable, which is the most important thing right now. But she's experienced severe trauma, both physical and psychological. Physically, she was severely dehydrated when she came in. Her kidneys have begun to shut down. We've got her on 4 fluids, and her kidney function is improving, but she'll need monitoring. She's also malnourished, with significant muscle atrophy in her legs from the restraint and lack of movement. The pressure sores are being treated with antibiotics to prevent infection. Dr. Franklin paused, meeting Thomas's eyes. The psychological impact is harder to quantify, but arguably more serious. Emma experienced prolonged isolation in complete darkness, with no sense of time and no certainty that help was coming. For a child her age, that's profoundly traumatic. She was also told, repeatedly according to her initial statements, that you had abandoned her, that you weren't coming back. For 16 days, she believed that. Thomas felt something crack inside his chest. She tried to call me. In the voicemail, she said she tried to be good. Children in abusive situations often blame themselves. It's a survival mechanism. If they're being punished, there must be a reason, and if they can just figure out how to be good enough, the punishment will stop. Emma has already shown signs of this thinking. When she first regained consciousness, she asked the nurses if she was in trouble for calling you. Can I see her? Yes. But Mr. Bonner, I need to prepare you. Emma is sedated right now because she became extremely agitated when she first woke up. She didn't recognize the hospital, thought she was still in the dark. The sedation is temporary, just until her body is stronger. When she wakes up fully, she may not understand what happened. She may be confused or frightened. She may not trust that she's safe. Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He sat beside Emma's bed for 6 hours, held her small hand, careful of the 4 line, watched her chest rise and fall with the rhythm of machines. A nurse came in periodically to check vitals and adjust medication. At some point, someone brought him coffee and a sandwich he didn't eat. McCarthy returned around 3 in the afternoon. We've charged your wife with attempted murder, first-degree child abuse, and unlawful imprisonment. Bail set at $2 million. She's not going anywhere. Eileen's charges are accessory after the fact and child endangerment. Lighter, but she's still in custody. Her bail is $500,000. They plan to kill her. We believe so, yes. The evidence suggests premeditation, the insurance policy, the preparation of the basement, your wife timing this for a trip where you'd be out of the country for an extended period. The boyfriend's involvement is still unclear. He's maintaining he didn't know anything about Emma. But his financial records show significant gambling debts. $200,000 to various casinos and bookies. Your wife was making cash deposits into his account, small amounts over several months. We're building a conspiracy case. Thomas looked down at Emma, at her too pale face and the bruises on her wrist where the chain had rubbed. I want them to suffer. McCarthy's expression didn't change. I understand. And the legal system will. No. Thomas looked up. You said yourself her lawyer will argue mental breakdown. Reduced sentence. Out in a few years. That's not justice. Mr. Bonner, I'm not stupid, detective. I know how this works. I know that people like my wife, people who look respectable and have good lawyers, they get second chances. They get sympathy. The jury hears about how hard it is to be a mother, how I was never home, how she was stressed and depressed, and it was just a terrible mistake that went too far. And my daughter who spent 16 days chained in the dark, who thought I abandoned her. She's the one who will live with this for the rest of her life while her mother maybe serves 5 years in a comfortable facility. McCarthy was quiet for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to know everything. Every detail, every piece of evidence. I want to understand exactly what they did and why and how they thought they'd get away with it. And then I'm going to decide what justice actually looks like. I can't be part of anything illegal. I'm not asking you to be. McCarthy studied him. Your wife's arraignment is in 3 days. You should get a lawyer, someone to represent you and Emma in the criminal case and in family court. You want full custody, obviously. Obviously. I'll send you copies of the police reports once they're finalized. Everything we found, everything we documented. It's public record anyway, but I'll expedite it. McCarthy stood. Mr. Bonner, I've been doing this job for 26 years. I've seen a lot of parents in your position. Most of them say they want revenge, but when it comes down to it, they let the system handle it. They move on, focus on helping their kid recover. I hope that's what you do. But if you don't, I hope you're smart about it. McCarthy left. Thomas sat in the dimming room as the sun set over Seattle, watching his daughter breathe, thinking about the voicemail he'd listened to 47 times during the flight home. Daddy, I try to be good. Emma stirred around midnight. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She saw Thomas, and for a moment there was no recognition, just fear. Then something shifted. Daddy, I'm here, Ladybug. I'm right here. You came back. Her voice was barely audible, damaged from days of crying in the dark. Of course I came back. I'll always come back. She started crying, small hitching sobs that shook her thin frame. Thomas wanted to hold her, but was afraid of hurting her, afraid of the tubes and wires in her fragile state. He settled for stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances while nurses came to check her vitals and Dr. Franklin ordered more sedation to help her rest. Before the medication pulled her under again, Emma whispered, "Is Mommy coming?" Thomas's hand stilled. "No, baby. Mommy's not coming." Good. Her eyes were already closing. "I don't want to see Mommy anymore. Or Grandma. They said you left me because I was bad. But I wasn't bad, Daddy. I promise I wasn't bad. I know. You're perfect. You've always been perfect." She was asleep. Thomas sat back in his chair and pulled out his phone. He had 42 unread emails, mostly from work. He opened a new search window and started typing. Lewis Mills Attorney, Seattle. Time to understand who he was dealing with. The next 3 days were a blur of doctors, police statements, and lawyers. Thomas hired Terry Beck, a family attorney recommended by Dr. Franklin who specialized in custody cases involving abuse. She was efficient and unsentimental, which Thomas appreciated. She filed for full custody and a restraining order against Alberta and Eileen within 12 hours of their first meeting. The criminal case is straightforward, Terry explained over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Your wife is going to prison. The question is for how long? Lewis Mills is good. He'll mount a strong defense, likely focus on mental health, claim she had a psychotic break. He'll put you on the stand and try to paint you as an absent father who drove her to desperation. I traveled for work. I provided for my family. I know, but he'll twist it. 3 weeks out of every month, never home for dinner, missing school events. He'll make it sound like abandonment. Then he'll find some expert witness to testify that prolonged isolation, meaning your wife's isolation, not Emma's, can lead to psychotic episodes. He'll argue diminished capacity. Thomas drank his coffee. It was bad, bitter, and lukewarm. What are Emma's chances of testifying? Against her mother? In a criminal trial? Terry shook her head. No prosecutor would call her. She's 8 and severely traumatized. Any decent defense attorney would shred her testimony, call it coached or unreliable. And honestly, it would be cruel to make her relive it. So my wife might walk. She won't walk. But she might get 15 years instead of life without parole. She might go to a psychiatric facility instead of maximum security. And Eileen, Terry grimaced. Eileen might only get 5 years, maybe less with a plea deal. The evidence against her is circumstantial. She was in the house. She probably knew what was happening, but proving she actively participated is harder. The voicemail. Emma said Eileen told her I wasn't coming back. Child's interpretation. Defense will say Emma misunderstood. These cases are frustrating because we all know what happened, but proving it beyond reasonable doubt is different. Thomas finished his coffee. What about the boyfriend? Roger West? They're still investigating him. Unless they can prove he knew about Emma's imprisonment or actively participated in planning it, he might not face charges at all. Having an affair and owing gambling debts isn't illegal. He was fucking my wife while my daughter was chained in my basement. Terry's expression softened slightly. I know, and if they can link him to the conspiracy, he'll face charges. But right now, all they have is phone records showing he called her a lot and financial records showing she gave him money. His lawyer will say he had no idea about Emma, that he thought the money was gifts from a generous girlfriend. It's sickening, but it might work. Alberta's arraignment was held in King County Superior Court on a rainy Thursday morning. Thomas sat in the gallery, watching his wife of 12 years shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and chains. She looked smaller somehow, her dark hair pulled back severely, no makeup. She didn't look at him. Lewis Mills was exactly what Thomas expected. Expensive suit, silver hair, air of competent authority. He argued smoothly for bail reduction, citing Alberta's lack of prior criminal history, her ties to the community, her own declining mental health. Your Honor, my client is a devoted mother who experienced a severe psychiatric crisis. She has no history of violence, no criminal record. She cooperated fully with police. The state's characterization of this as attempted murder is inflammatory and unsupported by the evidence. This was a tragic case of mental illness manifesting in a deeply regrettable way, but it was not premeditated violence. The prosecutor, a woman named Stella Alexander, countered forcefully. The defendant removed light bulbs from the basement to ensure complete darkness. She purchased a padlock and chain weeks before Mr. Bonner's trip. She forged his signature on a $5 million life insurance policy. She told her daughter repeatedly that her father had abandoned her. This was not a psychotic break, Your Honor. This was calculated cruelty with financial motivation. The judge, an older man with glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor, didn't budge on bail. Alberta remained in custody. Eileen's arraignment followed immediately after, and her bail was similarly upheld. Thomas watched them both led out of the courtroom. Alberta still didn't look at him. Eileen did, briefly, and in her eyes he saw not remorse but resentment. As if this was his fault somehow. As if he was the one who'd ruined everything. He followed Lewis Mills out of the courthouse, catching him at the parking garage entrance. Mr. Mills, a word. The lawyer turned, wary. Mr. Bonner, I'm sorry for what you're going through. I have children of my own. What happened to your daughter is horrific. But my job is to represent my client to the best of my ability. By arguing she had a psychotic break, Mills adjusted his briefcase. I'll argue whatever the evidence supports. Your wife has no prior history of violence or mental illness, but she also has no rational motive for what she did unless we accept that something in her mental state was fundamentally broken. A jury will want to understand why. I'll give them an explanation that makes sense. Even if it's a lie, it's not a lie if I believe it. Do you? Mills studied him. Mr. Bonner, I understand you want someone to pay. That's natural. But the legal system isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Those aren't the same thing. Not always. Mills walked toward his car. My advice? Focus on your daughter. Get her the help she needs. Let the system do its job. Thomas watched him drive away. Let the system do its job. He'd been letting systems do their jobs his entire life. Corporate systems, legal systems, bureaucratic systems. Most of the time they worked. Sometimes they failed. The question was whether he could afford to gamble on it working this time. That night, Emma had her first nightmare. Thomas was dozing in the chair beside her bed when she started thrashing, pulling against the four lines, screaming. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Franklin appeared within minutes. But Emma was inconsolable for 20 minutes before the sedatives took effect. She was dreaming about the basement, Dr. Franklin said quietly after Emma finally calmed. This is going to happen frequently for a while. Her brain is processing the trauma, and it's going to come out in nightmares, anxiety, maybe flashbacks. We'll start trauma therapy as soon as she's physically stable, but you need to prepare yourself for a long recovery. How long? Years. Maybe the rest of her life, in some form. What she experienced, prolonged isolation, betrayal by her primary caregiver, fear of abandonment. These are profound traumas. With good therapy and a stable, loving environment, she can heal. But she'll always carry this with her. Thomas looked at his daughter, finally peaceful in drugged sleep. 8 years old. She should be worrying about homework and sleepovers, not whether her father was going to abandon her in the dark. He made his decision then. The system might deliver justice, but he was going to deliver something more. He spent the next week at the hospital while Emma slowly improved. Her kidney function normalized. The pressure sores began healing. Physical therapy helped her regain strength in her legs. But the psychological damage was harder to treat. She woke up panicked every few hours, disoriented and terrified. She refused to be alone, even for a minute. If Thomas left to use the bathroom, she cried until he returned. She was terrified of the dark. They had to keep the lights on at full brightness at all times. But she was also getting stronger in other ways. On day 6, she asked what happened to her mother. She's not allowed to come near you anymore, Thomas said carefully. She did something very wrong, and she's going to be punished for it. Is she in jail? Yes. Emma was quiet for a long time. Good. On day 8, Detective McCarthy visited with an update. They were still building the case, but they'd found something interesting. Alberta's phone had been factory reset 2 days before Thomas returned from Tokyo, but forensics had recovered deleted text messages between her and Roger West. Most of it's what you'd expect from an affair. But there are a few messages that suggest he knew about the insurance policy. One text from her, sent the day after you left for Tokyo. It's done. 2 weeks max his response. You sure about the timing? Her. Better this way. Looks natural. That's conspiracy to commit murder. It suggests knowledge and involvement, yes. We've arrested West on conspiracy charges. His lawyer is arguing the texts are ambiguous, could refer to anything. But combined with the gambling debts and the money she was giving him, we're building a solid case. What about Eileen? McCarthy grimaced. Still just accessory charges. We've got circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete. She's maintaining she thought Emma was just being homeschooled and disciplined normally. Without Emma's testimony, which no one wants to put her through, it's hard to prove otherwise. After McCarthy left, Thomas pulled out his laptop and started researching. Lewis Mills, Alberta Bonner, Roger West, Eileen Stevenson. He built files on all of them, backgrounds, financials, social media, everything he could find. Mills was 62, divorced twice, 3 grown children. Successful practice focusing on criminal defense, particularly white-collar crime and cases involving mental health defenses. Good reputation, expensive. Lived in a condo in downtown Seattle, drove a Tesla, vacationed in Hawaii every February. Roger West was 36, no kids, never married. Grew up in Tacoma, dropped out of community college, worked as a personal trainer at 3 different gyms in 5 years. Gambling addiction started in his 20s. He'd been sued twice for unpaid debts. His social media showed a carefully curated image of fitness and success that was completely at odds with his actual financial situation. Eileen Stevenson was 67, widow of Marcus Stevenson, who died of a heart attack 2 years ago. She'd been a nurse before retiring, specializing in pediatrics, which made her involvement even more disturbing. She'd worked with children, knew about child development and welfare, and had still participated in torturing her own granddaughter. And Alberta, his wife, the woman he'd married 12 years ago because she'd seemed kind and genuine and easy to be with. Thomas realized he'd never really known her at all. He'd been too busy building a company, traveling for clients, providing financial security. He'd thought that was enough. Thought if he made enough money, gave him a nice house and good schools and vacations to Disneyland, that was what being a husband and father meant. He'd been wrong. On day 9, Emma was strong enough to be discharged from the ICU to a regular room. On day 12, she came home. Thomas had spent 3 days preparing the house. He'd had the basement door removed and the entire space professionally sealed and remodeled, though he planned to sell the house as soon as Emma was ready. He'd hired a private duty nurse, a kind woman named Mindy Morrison who specialized in pediatric trauma recovery. He'd converted his home office into a bedroom for himself, so Emma could have the master bedroom, which had more windows and better light. That first night home, Emma wouldn't sleep in a bed. She insisted on sleeping on the floor with every light on, and Thomas lay beside her on blankets and pillows, holding her hand until she finally exhausted herself into unconsciousness. He lay awake for hours, listening to her breathe, thinking about his wife in a jail cell, and wondering if she was sleeping peacefully or lying awake with regret. He decided he didn't care which. Alberta's trial was scheduled for 4 months out. Roger West's trial would follow. Eileen had been offered a plea deal, 5 years with possibility of parole in 3, and her lawyer was advising her to take it. Stella Alexander, the prosecutor, called Thomas regularly with updates and to discuss strategy. "Your wife's lawyer is floating a plea offer," she told him 3 weeks after Emma came home. 25 years, eligible for parole in 15, in exchange for pleading guilty to second-degree assault and child endangerment. She'd go to prison, not a psychiatric facility. That's it. 15 years. Could be. With good behavior, possibly less. I know it seems light, but if we go to trial and lose, she could get even less. Or if Mills convinces a jury she had diminished capacity, she could go to a facility and be out in 7 or 8 years. This guarantees she serves real time. No, Mr. Bonner. No, take it to trial. Let a jury decide. There was a long pause. Okay, I respect that. But you should know, trials are unpredictable. And Mills is very good at what he does. That night, Thomas made a phone call to an old college friend named Wilson Green, who'd gone into a very different line of work than software consulting. Wilson had started as a private investigator, but over the years had developed certain specialties. He didn't advertise, didn't have a website. You heard about Wilson through word of mouth, and only if you needed something that lived in gray legal areas. Tom Bonner. Been a long time. I need help. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I don't want sympathy. I want information. Wilson was quiet for a moment. What kind of information? The kind that doesn't show up in police reports. I want to know everything about my wife, her boyfriend, and her mother. Everything they've done, everyone they've hurt, every secret they're keeping. And I want to know their vulnerabilities. Tom, if you're thinking about, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to find out things. That's your job, isn't it? Finding things out. Another pause. It'll take some time, and it won't be cheap. I don't care about the cost. All right, I'll call you in 2 weeks. Thomas hung up and went to check on Emma. She was having another nightmare, whimpering in her sleep. He gently woke her, and she clung to him, shaking. "I'm here, Ladybug. You're safe. Promise? Promise." She fell back asleep. Thomas sat with her until dawn, watching the city lights through the window, planning. The trial was going to happen. The system was going to do what it did. But regardless of the outcome, Alberta and everyone who'd hurt his daughter were going to understand what real consequences felt like. Not 15 years with good behavior. Not a psychiatric facility with therapy and art classes. Not a plea deal that let them tell themselves it was all just a terrible mistake. Real consequences. Whatever that took. Wilson Green called 2 weeks later with the first batch of information. He'd been thorough as always. Thomas drove to a coffee shop in Bellevue to meet him, leaving Emma with Mindy Morrison for the first time since she'd come home. Emma had panicked initially, but Mindy had a gentle way about her that seemed to calm Emma down. Wilson looked the same. Graying hair, weathered face, perpetually wrinkled shirt. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your wife isn't who you thought she was. I figured that out. No, I mean before Emma. Before you. Alberta had a previous marriage when she was 23, lasted 18 months. It ended when her husband, a guy named Marcus Ridley, filed for divorce citing abuse. Specifically, psychological and financial abuse. He claimed she manipulated him into quitting his job, isolating him from his family, and then drained his bank accounts. The divorce was sealed, but I found the initial filings. Thomas opened the envelope. Court documents, bank statements, photos. The marriage ended when Ridley had some kind of breakdown. Ended up hospitalized for 3 weeks. After the divorce, he disappeared, moved out of state, changed careers. I tracked him down. He lives in Montana now. Doesn't talk about that time in his life, but when I mentioned Alberta's name, he hung up on me. Called back an hour later and said, quote, "I'm not surprised. She was always going to hurt someone." Thomas studied a photo of young Alberta with her first husband, all smiles and normal-looking happiness. What else? Her mother Eileen has a history too. She was fired from her nursing job at Seattle Children's Hospital 16 years ago. Official reason was policy violations, but I talked to some former colleagues. She was accused of deliberately injuring a child patient. Nothing that could be proven definitively, but enough that the hospital wanted her gone quietly to avoid a lawsuit. The child had broken ribs that didn't match the stated cause of injury. Jesus Christ. There's more. Roger West, your wife's boyfriend, has 2 previous assault charges from bar fights, both pleaded down to disorderly conduct. He's got a pattern of getting involved with older women who support him financially. Before your wife, he was seeing a woman named Deanna Phelps, 52, who gave him about $30,000 over 6 months before her family intervened. Before that, a woman named Geraldine Clark, 47. Same pattern. Thomas processed this. He's a con artist. Essentially, not a sophisticated one, but effective with lonely women who have money. Your wife fit his profile perfectly. Husband never home, money to spare, probably desperate for attention. And together they planned to kill my daughter for insurance money. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. That's where it gets complicated. I don't think the plan was originally to kill Emma. Thomas looked up sharply. What? The insurance policy was on you, not Emma. And the timing, locking Emma up while you were out of the country for 2 weeks. I think the original plan was for something to happen to you during that trip. An accident. You're alone in Tokyo, working late, tragic fall or robbery or something that looks random. You die. Alberta gets $5 million, splits it with West to pay off his debts and set them up nicely. But I didn't die. Right. You came home, and Emma called you, which meant their window was closing. They had to let her out, which meant she'd tell you what happened. So they had to adapt the plan. Make it look like Emma died while you were gone. Neglect, maybe, or an accident in the basement. Then you come home to tragedy. Wife is devastated. Investigation happens, but ultimately rules it accidental death. Wife collects insurance, plays the grieving mother for a respectable period, then moves on with West. Thomas felt cold. They were going to kill both of us. Most likely. But Emma complicated things by surviving longer than they expected, and by leaving that voicemail, which meant police got there before she died. Classic plan falling apart because the participants weren't as smart as they thought they were. What about Lewis Mills? My wife's attorney. Clean, unfortunately. Good reputation, plays by the rules. He genuinely believes his clients deserve the best defense possible, even when they're obviously guilty, which makes him effective but also predictable. Thomas closed the envelope. What else do I need to know? Alberta has been talking to other inmates, bragging about how she's going to get off with a light sentence. Mills has convinced her that her mental health defense will work. She thinks she'll be out in a few years, says she'll get Emma back eventually because you were a negligent father who drove her to desperation. Rage, white-hot and clarifying, flooded through Thomas. She said she'd get Emma back. That's what my source inside heard. She's delusional, Tom. She genuinely believes she's the victim here. Thomas stood up. Thank you for this. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. But Wilson, if I need more help, the kind that goes beyond finding information, can you point me toward people who provide that kind of service? Wilson studied him. Don't do anything stupid. I won't do anything stupid, but I will do something permanent. The trial began on a cold Monday in March. Lewis Mills put on exactly the performance Thomas expected. Sympathetic, articulate, painting Alberta as a woman destroyed by circumstances. He called expert witnesses who testified about postpartum depression that could linger for years, about the psychological impact of social isolation, about how people under extreme stress could dissociate and commit acts they'd never normally consider. He put Alberta on the stand. She cried beautifully, describing how lonely she'd been, how abandoned she'd felt, how Thomas's constant traveling had eroded their marriage. She claimed she'd only meant to discipline Emma, that she'd checked on her regularly, that she'd lost track of time because she was having a breakdown. I never wanted to hurt her, Alberta sobbed. She's my daughter. I love her more than anything. I was just so lost, so confused. I didn't know what I was doing. Stella Alexander cross-examined ruthlessly, but Mills had prepared his client well. Alberta had an explanation for everything. The insurance policy? She'd been worried about their financial future if something happened to Thomas. The padlock and chain? She'd bought them months earlier for a shed project that never happened. The removed light bulbs? She thought Emma was afraid of the dark and left a flashlight with her. The flashlight was a lie. No flashlight had been found at the scene, but Mills had planted reasonable doubt. Roger West testified that he'd known nothing about Emma's imprisonment. Yes, he'd been having an affair with Alberta. Yes, she'd given him money, but he thought she was just being generous. He'd had no idea she was planning anything criminal. I feel terrible, West said, managing to sound sincere. If I'd known what she was going through, what she was doing, I would have stopped her. I would have called the police. More lies, but delivered convincingly. Eileen took a plea deal before the trial ended. 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. She'd serve her time in a minimum security facility, basically a comfortable prison with therapy and education programs. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was mixed, guilty of assault and child endangerment, but not attempted murder. The conspiracy charges against West were dropped due to insufficient evidence. Alberta was sentenced to 12 years, eligible for parole in 8. Roger West walked free. Thomas sat in the gallery and watched his wife led away in chains, saw the small smile of relief on her face because it could have been so much worse, and knew that the system had failed. 12 years for torturing a child. 8 if she behaved herself. Roger West collecting no consequences at all except a brief stint in jail before the charges were dropped. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for his statement. He gave them nothing, just walked to his car where Terry Beck was waiting. I know this isn't what you wanted, she said. It's not what Emma deserved. We got full custody, permanent restraining order. Alberta will never be able to contact Emma again, even after she gets out. In 8 years, Emma will be 16. Alberta will be out of prison, and my daughter will spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if her mother is coming for her. Terry didn't argue because there was no argument to make. The system had done its best, and its best wasn't enough. That night, Thomas made another call to Wilson Green. I need you to introduce me to someone who can help me with a problem. Tom. She tortured my daughter for 16 days and got 12 years. Her boyfriend walked. Her mother will be out in 3 years. And all of them think they won because it could have been worse. I need help making sure they understand how wrong they are. Wilson was quiet for a long time. There are people who can make problems disappear, but that's not your style. You're not a killer. I don't want them dead. I want them destroyed. What does that mean? I want Alberta to understand what it feels like to be trapped and helpless. I want Roger West to lose everything he thinks makes him valuable. I want Eileen to feel the fear Emma felt. And I want them to know that I did it, that Emma's father made it happen, and there's nothing they can do about it. Another long pause. I know someone. He's expensive, and he doesn't work with just anyone. But he specializes in making people's lives fall apart in ways that look natural. No violence, nothing traceable, just systematic destruction. Interested? Very. I'll set up a meeting. But Tom, once you start down this road, you can't undo it. I don't want to undo it. I want to finish it. The meeting happened in a restaurant in Tacoma, neutral territory. The man Wilson introduced as Jay was younger than Thomas expected, maybe 40, dressed like a consultant in business casual. He could have been anyone, accountant, HR manager, insurance adjuster. Perfect camouflage for someone who destroyed lives professionally. Wilson tells me you have a situation, Jay said, stirring sugar into coffee. Thomas laid out the story efficiently. Jay listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his phone. The way I work is simple, Jay said when Thomas finished. You tell me what you want the outcome to be, and I figure out how to make it happen. I don't do violence, don't do anything that creates evidence trails. What I do is find vulnerabilities and exploit them. Financial stress, social humiliation, legal problems, relationship breakdowns. I accelerate natural consequences until the target's life becomes unlivable. How long does it take? Depends on the target and the outcome you want. Some people fall apart quickly. Others are more resilient. But everyone breaks eventually if you apply the right pressure in the right places. I want Alberta to lose everything. Her appeal, her reputation, her sense of control. I want her to serve every day of her sentence afraid and isolated. That's doable. Prison is a controlled environment, which makes it easier in some ways. Inmates follow patterns. Guards can be influenced. Information can be spread. What specific outcome? Thomas thought about Emma's nightmares, about her refusal to sleep in the dark, about how she still flinched when anyone touched her unexpectedly. I want her to experience what she did to Emma. Isolation, fear, helplessness. Every day for 12 years. Jay made another note. Roger West, financial ruin, public humiliation. I want everyone to know what he is and what he did. I want him broke and unemployable and exposed. Easy enough. He's already got debt and a pattern of conning women. We just accelerate that, make sure his name gets attached to his crimes publicly, maybe add some legal problems that don't land him in jail, but make his life miserable. And Eileen, the grandmother, she'll be out in 3 years. What happens then? Thomas considered. I want her afraid, not physically harmed, but living in constant fear that consequences are coming. I want her to never feel safe again. Jay nodded. I can work with that. My fee is $200,000, half up front. It'll take approximately 6 to 8 months to fully implement across all 3 targets. You'll get regular updates, but no direct contact. Everything goes through Wilson. If at any point you wanted to stop, I stop, but the money's non-refundable. Done. They shook hands. Thomas transferred $100,000 that night through a series of accounts Wilson had set up specifically to be untraceable. For the next 6 months, Thomas focused on Emma. She started trauma therapy 3 times a week with a psychologist named Dr. Isaac Grant, who specialized in child abuse cases. Progress was slow but steady. The nightmares decreased from every night to a few times a week. She started sleeping in a bed again, though still with lights on. She began drawing dark, troubled pictures at first, all shadows and chains, but gradually incorporating more color and light. She asked about her mother only once. Is Mommy sorry for what she did? Thomas considered lying, but decided on the truth. I don't know if she understands what she did wrong. She hurt me on purpose. Yes. And you're going to make sure she can't hurt me again? Yes, I promise. Emma nodded, satisfied. She was young, but not naive. She understood that sometimes daddies had to protect their daughters from monsters, even when the monsters looked like mommies. Meanwhile, Jay went to work. The first update came after 2 weeks. Target A, Alberta, has been transferred to general population at Washington Correction Center for Women. I've established contacts with several inmates who've been made aware of her crimes against a child. Prison culture has its own justice system. She'll be ostracized at minimum, likely worse. Guards have also been informed through unofficial channels that she's not to receive any special protections. After 4 weeks, Target B, Roger West, has been fired from his gym after an anonymous tip led management to investigate his background. His gambling debts have been purchased by a collection agency I work with. They're significantly more aggressive than standard collectors. He's received 3 judgments against him in the past month, which tanks his credit score. Local news has also been anonymously tipped about his involvement in your wife's case. Expecting a story to run next week. After 8 weeks, Target A is in solitary confinement following an altercation with another inmate. This is actually beneficial. Solitary is psychologically devastating, especially long-term. I've arranged for her to be placed on a rotation that maximizes her time in isolation. Target B's story ran in local paper, smaller than hoped, but still public. His landlord has been informed of his legal troubles and gambling addiction. Eviction proceedings beginning. After 12 weeks, Target C, Eileen, will be released in 6 months. Beginning groundwork now for her release environment. All potential housing applications will be rejected through various administrative errors. Her nursing license has been flagged for review based on her conviction, likely to be permanently revoked. Social Circle is being informed of her role in Emma's abuse through careful information distribution. After 16 weeks, Target A attempted suicide in solitary. Unsuccessful on watch now. Target B is homeless, living in his car. All employment applications being systematically rejected through background check manipulation. He's borrowing money from dangerous people now. Natural consequences will accelerate. Target C's release has been complicated by administrative issues that will likely delay her by 6 months. Additional prison time is its own punishment. Thomas read each update carefully, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. These weren't innocent people suffering unjustly. These were people who'd tortured a child, conspired to commit murder, and felt entitled to walk away with light consequences. Jay wasn't doing anything they hadn't earned. After 24 weeks, Jay called for a rare direct conversation. We need to discuss Target B. He's spiraling faster than anticipated. He's made threats against you and Emma in conversations with former associates. I can neutralize that permanently if you want, but it would require more aggressive intervention. What kind of intervention? The kind that ensures he disappears from your life completely. Relocates to somewhere far away with strong incentives to never come back. No violence, but definitely coerced. Thomas thought about Roger West testifying that he'd known nothing, walking out of that courthouse free, while Emma still woke up screaming. Do it. Understood. After 28 weeks, the final update. Target B has accepted a job opportunity in Alaska with a fishing company. He'll be working on a boat for the next 18 months minimum. No contact with outside world except occasional shore leave. By the time he returns, if he returns, he'll be financially stable enough not to be a threat, but psychologically beaten down enough not to try anything. Target A has been in and out of solitary 6 times, has attempted suicide twice more, is currently on psychiatric medication, and considered a high-risk inmate. She'll serve her full sentence in maximum security conditions. Target C's release has been delayed another 8 months due to behavioral issues that I helped manufacture. When she does get out, she'll find no housing, no job prospects, and a community that knows exactly what she did. The rest is natural consequences. Thomas transferred the final $100,000. Thank you. You're welcome. Wilson will delete this number after we hang up. We never met. This conversation never happened. Understood. That evening, Thomas sat with Emma in her room, reading her favorite book about a girl who could talk to animals. Emma had been laughing earlier at dinner. Actual, genuine laughter for the first time in months. She was healing. Slowly but healing. "Daddy," she said as he closed the book. "Yes, Ladybug. Are you going to be here tomorrow?" "I'm going to be here every day. Forever. Forever." She smiled and closed her eyes. No nightmares that night. Thomas went to his office and opened his laptop. He pulled up a news article about Alberta's condition in prison. There had been a small piece about increased suicide attempts at the women's facility, though no names were mentioned. He read about Roger West's last known location, working on a crab boat in the Bering Sea, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. He read about Eileen's delayed release and the housing crisis she was facing. The system had given them 12 years, dropped charges, and 3 years respectively. Thomas had given them something else entirely. He closed the laptop and went to check on Emma one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, finally, her breathing steady and calm. He remembered her voicemail, remembered her small voice saying, "Daddy, I try to be good." She had been good. She'd always been good. And now, finally, she was safe. Thomas Bonner had learned something important. The legal system and justice weren't always the same thing. Sometimes you had to create justice yourself. Sometimes you had to be the consequence that people like Alberta and Roger and Eileen never saw coming. He'd been a good father before, present when he could be, loving, providing. Now he was something more, a father who understood that protecting your child meant more than just being there. It meant ensuring that the people who hurt her paid a price that actually mattered. Not 12 years with good behavior. Not dropped charges. Not 3 years in a comfortable facility. Real consequences. Lasting consequences. The kind that followed you for the rest of your life and whispered in your ear every day. You hurt an innocent child, and her father made sure you'd never forget it. Emma stirred in her sleep, reaching for the stuffed rabbit Thomas had given her the day she came home from the hospital. She pulled it close and smiled in her dreams. Thomas turned off the lights. She'd finally learned to sleep in the dark again, and closed her door softly. He'd made a lot of mistakes as a father. Traveled too much, prioritized work over family, missed signs he should have caught. But he'd learned. He'd changed. And he made absolutely certain that Emma would grow up knowing one thing with perfect clarity. Her father would always come back. And anyone who hurt her would learn to regret it. Completely. Permanently. Without exception. In the darkness of his own room, Thomas finally slept peacefully for the first time since that voicemail arrived 16 hours and 14 minutes after Emma left it, her small voice breaking as she said, "Daddy, I try to be good." She had been good. Now her father had made everything right. Not through the system that had failed them, but through understanding that sometimes love meant being ruthless with the people who'd proven they deserved nothing less. Emma was safe. That was what mattered. Everything else was just consequences. And consequences, Thomas had learned, could be exactly as permanent and devastating as you needed them to be. If you were willing to step outside the lines the system drew. If you were willing to ensure justice happened, one way or another. He'd been willing. And now Emma could heal, knowing her father had made absolutely certain that the monsters who'd hurt her would never, ever hurt anyone else again. Not the way they'd hurt her. Not ever again. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.